Hello, Alohomora listeners, and in this case, viewers. Welcome to The Great Snape Debate, a special extra slice of Alohomora, all about our great anti-hero, Severus Snape. I am Michael Harley.
And I'm Rosie Morris. Hopefully that worked. Hello.
There she is.
Sorry about that slight delay. Hello, listeners. We hope that you are all enjoying the evening so far. I think it's only 5:20 for you guys over there, but it is 10:20 for me. So sorry that I'm in a slightly shadier looking room than Michael in nice bright sunshine. Hopefully you can all hear us. There is a group chat available on the side, so please do be writing away in there. And please do be sending us in your comments. Waiting to try and see someone say hello in the chat just to make sure that's working. Looks like some of you are here.
We know we're a little bit late. We had some technical issues, listeners.
But we're ghosts in the system.
Yes, but we're glad you stuck with us, and we're hoping to see you here. So when we can see some of you saying hi in the chat, then we'll know that we've got a few of you to talk to. But in the meantime, maybe Rosie, you can summarize kind of what we're doing today with this.
Sure. So as you can see, we are live here on the Google Hangouts. Our guests today are hopefully going to be all of you guys. We've got some comments that you guys have left. We've got the opportunity to invite you to come and talk to me and Michael. So if you've got a microphone around, you don't have to show yourself on the webcam. We can completely kind of blank you out whilst you're doing that. You just have to kind of talk to us if you'd like to use your voice. Otherwise, you can write to us, you can tweet us, you can talk to us on Facebook. We've got a few comments from our Alohomora main site that you guys have left since the episode came live on Saturday. But what we're really doing is trying to broaden the discussion of Snape here. We really want to try and ground it in The Prince's Tale as much as possible, but whatever you guys have available, we'd like it to be a text-based discussion. So please make sure you've got your copies of whichever books that you want to talk about Snape from, and just kind of bring us in your comments, and we are going to try and work out just who is Severus Snape.
Well, and we certainly tried to on our episode 184, I believe it was, of Alohomora. But we definitely had a slightly one-sided panel of the argument. But I mean, what's been so impressive about that particular episode is normally, we start seeing comments coming in later into the week. We start to hit around 200 or so middle of the week. We hit 150, I think, by like maybe 4 or 5 hours after the episode came out, and we're close. I think we passed 500. So the discussion has been quite impressive so far.
It has. So we have got some questions actually on the side. You guys have already been using the Q&A function, so thank you very much for doing that. Still waiting to see a few more of you in the chat. I'm not sure if that's actually available to you guys. I'm trying to find a way of working out whether you're here.
It looks like they're watching us, and they are. I see a few people are according to YouTube, are watching us. All you guys have to do, actually, you should be able, if you have a YouTube account or a Google account, you should be able to actually leave a comment for us on the comments section, and we will be able to see it through Google Hangouts.
If you're looking at us kind of in a normal screen, there might be a little thing on the left-hand side with a little blue speech bubble. If you click on that, that's the chat.
Okay, good. Just hope we're doing that. I hope they're able to communicate with us soon, because we definitely want to get you guys in this discussion too. Let's see. They're probably all sitting at their computers going, how do we do it?
People are saying, I only see Q&A functions, no chat. But at least that means that they can hear us. So thank you, Connor Bresnan, for saying that in the Q&A function. Maybe we'll just start reading some of these out then, or putting them up on the system. In that case, if you guys would like to come and talk to us, if you've got a microphone and some headphones available, if you could maybe in the Q&A function, you can write in there, I have something to say, and then we can kind of pick you up and invite you in if possible. So please do be using that so that we can know who is there to come and chat to us. The way that that's going to work is that we're going to hopefully invite you. We're going to literally kind of phone you via your computer, and then you'll be invited in to talk to us for a few minutes. We can discuss something together, or you can just say something and we'll discuss it as a group. And then we'll let you go back into the mists of the chat and be hidden from us again. Let's get this debate going, says Astra, and yes, we should.
Well, and before we properly get it going, I see too that it looks like we've got to get them over. We've got to get these guys to also be seeing us through the Google page, the link to this on Google, and then they can start commenting that way too.
Okay.
That'll also probably help us be able to bring them into the chat, which is what we want to do. Live shows, technical difficulties.
So yes, there is a Google event that you should hopefully be able to see, and you can find us on our page there, and that is where you should be trying to talk to us.
Rosie, is that Google event page posted on our public forums for them to find?
I thought it was. That's what I was tweeting out earlier, hopefully.
Oh, okay. In fact, I'm going to go check that myself right now.
So if you go to the Alohomora Twitter, that's Alohomora MN. If you haven't heard us talking about that so many times before, you should be able to see a plus.google.com, and there should be something in there that you can click on. If you click on maybe our logo on that link, it might take you in.
There we go. Let's see here.
Sorry, guys, bear with us. Do you guys see the comments on the Hangout page? Yes, we do. We have looked at that earlier on. I'm going to be swapping in between those. I posted one that said, "Can you see us?" just a second ago. So yes, Leah, Michael's feed is not still green, as you can hopefully see now.
Yay!
And I've got Courtney and Grace and Connor and Sabrina and lots of people's questions there that we will be looking at. So now that we've got some confirmation that some of you guys can see us, we'll get started, and we can always kind of bring you guys more in later on. So let's see, we've answered that one. Answered that one. So which one should we start with, Michael?
Ooh, that's big. So let's see here in the Q&A. Oh my goodness, because you guys, I was very impressed. I was just scanning through them earlier, and you guys did add some really great questions. Let's see. So let's see. Let me make sure I've got all of the questions I'm looking at this. Oh, okay. So Leah asked, does Dumbledore trust Snape because he sees Snape's relationship with Lily as similar to his relationship with Grindelwald? I think that's an excellent question. We actually kind of talked about that a little bit on the episode on 184, and that's kind of what our podcast question of the week addresses, if you guys haven't checked that out yet, because we noted that the text is a bit ambiguous about whether Dumbledore is actually the one crying when he sees the doe, or if it's Snape who's crying. So
He's crying.
Look at those two.
Over my shoulder. For the chat today.
From those big bulbous eyes. But with that, we had wondered if there was a tie-in to Grindelwald's story. It's interesting because textually, we can't necessarily see that, because that's not Dumbledore's relationship in that way with Grindelwald isn't in the text. And it wasn't necessarily explicit until Rowling said it. So that's also dependent on how you read the canon, I guess. I don't know. What's your opinion on that, Rosie?
I'm of the similar view to, I think it was Kat that said that anything that J.K. Rowling says that doesn't kind of automatically contradict canon is canon. So I totally buy into all of the Grindelwald story. I love having that kind of extra richness to the kind of Potterverse. In terms of Dumbledore trusting Snape because of that previous relationship, I don't think that would be a reason to trust him. The relationship between Dumbledore and Grindelwald was so destructive, and so passionate, but in a way that was definitely not the most productive. That he wouldn't necessarily trust a similar relationship again. I think he really learned from the mistakes of his youth in that way. It might make him understand Snape more, but not necessarily trust him more because of it. I think he's got his own reasons for trusting Snape, which maybe, to do with seeing himself and seeing a similar character, but not really to do with the Grindelwald relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I think that the part where Dumbledore truly sees that correlation between his feelings for Grindelwald and Snape's for Lily's is the dough, and that isn't revealed until very close to Dumbledore's passing, about just possibly a few months before Dumbledore dies, as we pointed out in the episode. So yeah, that's hard to say. I think you're right, Rosie, that Snape might have recognized, or Dumbledore might have recognized that in Snape. And I think there's lines throughout their interactions that we see in The Prince's Tale that indicate that Dumbledore is kind of trying to impart that knowledge to Snape about the idea of kind of what his love means for Lily. And he finally, they both finally get it in that final scene with the silver dough.
Yeah. I think there is so much within the interactions that we see between Snape and Dumbledore within The Prince's Tale that only really scratches the surface of what must have happened in that relationship. And I think Joe is trying to pack as much into that very short chapter as possible. And we really have to do a lot of reading between the lines and filling in the gaps when it comes to their relationship, because we don't really get to see them that much. The restriction of having the whole story be told through Harry's narrative is that we only ever see these people as professors. And you guys all know that I've got issues with Dumbledore, and this chapter is actually one of the ones that I have the biggest issues with Dumbledore in. Everyone was kind of talking about Snape in this chapter, but I would have loved to have looked at Dumbledore more in this chapter, because it was, for me, the biggest transformation that we see of Dumbledore. And it is this prism of his relationship with Snape that we get to actually see Dumbledore the man, rather than Dumbledore the professor and Dumbledore the grandfather figure and Dumbledore the mentor. And it's interesting to try and see maybe how differently Dumbledore treats Snape to how Dumbledore treats Harry. And the almost equals in the conversation. And I think that's where the conversation about the silver dough and all of that kind of thing comes in, because for Dumbledore to be that shocked and for Dumbledore to have that kind of crying reaction, if it is his tears or if it's Snape's tears, either way, it doesn't really matter. But for Dumbledore to be surprised by something that Snape does shows that, Snape is a master at concealing his emotions and concealing what is going on. We know that he is the most successful occlumency person, or whatever it is. So for him to have hidden that from Dumbledore as well shows that he is immensely powerful. And yeah, we really don't know much about the relationship between these two men, other than what we see in this chapter. So it's very much open to interpretation. And I've talked for a long time. You go.
Well, no, I was going to say in the comments, Skagai said, and hello, Skagai, good to see you here. Said, when Dumbledore is frankly shocked at Snape's Patronus, I think we can surmise that he misunderstood something about Snape for a very long time. And I think that's definitely true. Now, there were a lot of There's a lot of comments on the Google page, kind of actually asking us to, let's see here, where did that one go? Because I think that one was really important for us to define. Okay. So Skagai also asked for us to maybe start with some basics, and this very big question that I think is very open-ended, and I think this is most evidence is open-ended by the conversations that have been going on the main site this week. What is real love? And is Snape's love of Lily real? And is Snape a sympathetic character? I'm assuming sympathetic in tandem with whether or not we feel his feelings are real love or not. So
that
Rosie,
is a big question.
I'll let you go in on that one.
How do you define real love? Yeah. I think that we see so many different kinds of love within the Harry Potter series, and they are all real. They are all different versions of real love, and an immature love is still a real love. A mature love is still a real love. A obsessive love is still a real love. Whether it's a productive love, whether it's a kind of love that is beneficial in any way, is what is more up for debate. And you know, when you are a child and you develop your first crush and all that kind of thing, you are going to change from that first crush to the crush that Snape kind of has for his whole life, and it does develop. And I think that Snape's love is real, and I think he does feel it, and I think I know a lot of people were kind of saying that, oh, it's not love, it's obsession, or that it was so kind of grounded in his idea of who Lily was. But I think that is still a kind of real love, and I do still think that there is we should feel some sympathy for this character for having something that he really wanted and never managed to get. I obviously don't think that Lily should have gone with him or anything like that. I don't think it would have been a good relationship if they had ever had one, because of their conflicting ideas. And I think if they ever had tried to have a relationship, it would have fallen apart quite quickly. But that doesn't stop what Snape felt from being real, and it doesn't stop him from being able to love her. And you know, we never see him pursuing her in a overtly creepy way. She says no, they have their argument, whatever, and he backs off and he loves her from afar. So it's not like he took it to creepy obsessive stalker levels or anything. It's not necessarily something that developed into a severely negative obsession. It's something that he felt and he acknowledged that he was feeling, and that obviously affected him in his life all the way through, right to the very end. And I don't think that's something that we should consider as a negative thing. Does that make sense?
Well, yes. And in our Q&A, username Astra and Her Musings, which is a great username, yelled out, "Snape's love isn't love, it's obsession." And we've definitely got that side of the debate in episode 184.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that debate, to me, that's like actually the biggest debate that's going on is kind of defining Snape's love. So it's funny, Skagai, to start with that as the basics, because while that's kind of the core of this, that's not basic, because this is probably the most complicated issue about Snape. And it really is, I think, down to personal experience, as you define it, because love, as the series shows, and I think even obsession, are such because I actually just I just Googled love and obsession their definitions. Love is, as defined by Google, an intense feeling of deep affection, and obsession is the state of being, or no, that's not a good definition. The good definition is an idea or thought that continually preoccupies or intrudes on a person's mind. And I'm more inclined to agree with what Rosie said, where the two in the case of Snape feed each other. That they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. It doesn't necessarily devalue the pureness of Snape's love, I guess, as evidenced by his Patronus. But was it healthy? Was it something that had good results for everybody involved? Was it a love that matured? I would argue no, personally, only because Snape, as I said in the episode, doesn't really, and we really, I think, argued this with the text, doesn't seem to understand Lily at certain levels. Like he gets things about, he kind of has a selective hearing issue.
Yeah.
Where he sees what he wants to see in a lot of cases with Lily. And yet that doesn't necessarily make his love impure. It's just that there's elements of it that didn't work out between him and Lily.
I think one thing that was said in the episode was that Snape couldn't have loved Lily because if he had loved her, then he would have left his friends and would have agreed with her point of view. And it just made me kind of think, well, if we gender flip these characters and it was the girl that we were telling to leave her friends and go with this guy because she loved him, we would never do that. We would always kind of consider that a very problematic issue. We would never advise anyone to leave their friends because of a love and because of a passion. So it's interesting to me that we're using that as a defense to say of why he doesn't love her. And I think it's right for a teenage boy to stick with his friends and stick with his roommates and stick with the family that he's been kind of shown to be part of. Obviously, I don't agree with the ideas, and obviously I don't think that it was a good situation for him to be in. And I would have liked for him to have left that situation for himself and to join the good side. But I think he does that because of Lily, and he does become this double agent, and he does become all of these things, having realized how far the friends are taking the negative issues. So I don't see him staying with his friends and not following Lily's ideas as evidence of him not loving her. I just see that as two different people having two different ideas, and that being a cause of friction, and that's why they would never get closer, and that's why you've got this barrier between them. It doesn't disprove a love of a person, it just prevents a relationship.
Astra in her musings fairly points out with this argument, because I think the gender swap is a great way to contextualize it, saying if your friends were equivalent to Nazis, I think we would be saying to leave them.
This is true. But at the time, within the kind of rise to power kind of thing, we would probably still say leave your friends, but we can't say that just kind of solely based on their relationship. We can't use that as a reason for this character Snape and this character Lily to not be together. We can use that as a reason why he should be leaving the Nazi party, and we can use that as he shouldn't be a Death Eater, but it's not. There has to be a disconnect between the relationship and what's going on. People do bad things in life. People still love those people even though they've done those bad things. Love is not the same as always agreeing with everything that you do. And it's important that we recognize that difference when thinking about it.
I think in terms of Lily, though, I suppose the issue is that she sees, not only is it so much that she's seeing him joining a group that actively would not like her as a person just because of her birth, like of her blood, what family she was born into, but also because she sees that doing something negative to him. It's not necessary. I guess when we go into that defense, we have to look to it, why, like the reasonings behind why she's saying for him to leave his friends. It's not just kind of so much a dump your friends for me, because Lily, as we found out from Rowling, is not necessarily romantically interested in Snape at this point. Her love for him is as a friend. So the concern that she's having isn't necessarily coming from a romantic place. Just dump your friends so that you can be with me, or that because that's what I want. It's more of a dump your friends because, or maybe even a re-examine your friends and re-examine what your friends are doing to you. It's more of a warning on her part, which is why I think she gets so frustrated in the end. By the way, Rosie, I know you, I believe, have control over this, but Skagai has said that he will join the conversation at any point.
Yes, I'm trying to find out how to invite him. You have to bear with us, listeners and viewers now. We're trying to work out this Google Hangout thing. Every single time we've done this, it's changed. So we're giving it a go. Skagai, I think I've added you to our little kind of circles thing. So I'm going to try and send you a link. Hopefully it will work.
Yes, that should come through your email or your Google page. I think it'll actually show up on your Google account page.
Yes,
that you can accept that invite. So, and Kat wonderfully is also in the comments. So, and she's been dropping us tips when we for technical stuff. So thank you, Kat. We appreciate the help. Let's see. And while you do that, I'm gonna take a look through some more of these Q&As, because we are getting a lot of responses. So, and you guys keep them coming. We're really enjoying this, actually. And too, what's really nice too is it appears you guys can vote up each other's Q&A comments, so that we can also kind of see what you guys really want to focus on as well.
Yes, please do that.
Let's see. A lot of you are still kind of talking about how Dumbledore and Snape, kind of their relationship kind of factors into this, which is really interesting. Oh, you know what? This is a good one too, also from Skagai, just asking like how, Rosie, what's your overall opinion of Snape? Because you obviously weren't on 184, and I'm sure the listeners would like to know kind of how you feel about Snape in general.
I think I'm the most sympathetic towards Snape out of all of us, apparently, which was a shock to me as well. As I said earlier, I actually have more issues with Dumbledore than Snape at this point, which is interesting, because Snape is so obviously meant to be the anti-hero, and he's meant to be a villainous character, and he has been a villainous character in terms of his treatment of Harry. I see him as a very complicated character, and I do not agree with a lot of what he does, but that does not make me actively dislike him as a character and as a person. I find his story very interesting, and I find the relationships he has, again, very interesting. Just the way that he kind of goes about his life, and the way that he has tried to overcome a very, very difficult childhood, and he tried to find things that would be good for him, and he doesn't necessarily take that as far as he should to make it a really good situation. But at the same time, you know, he has got all of these other influences that are shaping his life. And I think what he chooses to do in the end, and when he does become the double agent, and when he is kind of in so deep that there's no way for him to get out of the situation that he's in once he is in the kind of inner circle of Death Eaters. He's quite a similar character to Regulus but we never see Regulus. He's got the same double agent storyline, but because we've got so much other information about Snape, we know obviously a lot more about him, so there's more reason to dislike him. I find it interesting that more people don't dislike Regulus Black because of all of the stuff that he did, because he was a Death Eater. Yes, he kind of stole a Horcrux and he did all that kind of stuff and he tried to get out, but he did the same thing as Snape did, but we forgive Regulus. It is only Snape that we completely demonize for being the Death Eater. And considering he did do a lot of good, otherwise Dumbledore wouldn't have used him as this spy. He wouldn't, especially in the Second War, he wouldn't have trusted him to go back. There has to be more to it than just what we've been given. Yeah, so I don't dislike him. Very long-winded answer to a short question.
That's, it's, I think really with Regulus, it perhaps comes down to screen time, so to speak. He, like you said, he's not somebody we actually meet on the page, or really get to know beyond what Sirius's impressions are of him, I guess. So it's I think there's more of just a natural attachment for the reader to somebody like Snape, who we see all the time. But because interestingly, a lot of listeners in the comments were kind of saying that if people don't like Snape, but they like somebody like Sirius, how is that fair? And I thought that was interesting because I think listeners, if you go back to Prisoner through Order, especially in Order, I think you'll see that we really deconstructed Sirius too, and did not completely give him the benefit of the doubt with his behavior. Kind of realizing that, especially in Order of the Phoenix, he's a very unfit godfather in many ways for Harry. But just like with Snape, there's a lot of things about his life that cause that, and yet at the same time does not necessarily excuse his actions and his behavior during that time. Now there's more comparisons kind of running through and ponderings. Jessica Crawford left the question saying, if Snape's childhood had not been so miserable, would that have changed his relationship with Lily, or what he chose to do after Hogwarts?
Yes.
I mean, I'd say so. This kind of ties into a question that was asked on the podcast. Oh, you got something, Rosie. You go first.
No, I think Connor is here.
Oh, Connor. We see that you're in the Hangout, Connor. Just make sure your mic is tuned to the right mic, so that Google Hangout is picking you up, okay? All you have to do is go to that gear at the top, and then it'll show you all your microphone settings. Just make sure you're picked up on the right mic, because we cannot hear you yet. So you just keep talking. Yes, you jump in when you're here. And let's see. So, a question that was actually, there he is. We see you, Connor.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, we're glad you're here, Connor. Yes, we can.
Okay, good.
So, Connor, we're probably a little ahead of where you saw us when you were watching us on the feed. But is there anything? I know there's probably everything you'd like to discuss, but is there any one particular thing you want to jump in on?
The Dumbledore Snape thing that Rosie was talking about.
Sure.
Rosie said you dislike Dumbledore in this scene. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
Okay, I put in a thing in the comments that I wrote it and I wasn't even sure if I agree with it, but the more I read it, I kind of like it. In that, when Dumbledore hears Snape say or sees the Do Patronus, he's realizing that he has misunderstood Snape this whole time, because he thought Snape's love was possessive, which a lot of the hosts thought that his love was possessive and obsessive. But I think Dumbledore in that moment realized, because the doe is the symbol of hope and happiness, that he had to have been wrong. And so he's so shocked that he's misunderstood his man the whole time. And so that's why in all the memories that they have, They're not cordial at all. They're not friendly. In fact, Dumbledore's reading a Transfiguration today at one point, as if, why is this guy pestering me again? So I think knowing all that, it really helps me understand Dumbledore's character a little bit more, because he's also dealing with, for about 20 years of this time period where he thinks he's going to have to tell Harry that he's going to die, and then he's really actually going to die, because he doesn't know he's going to be saved. So this whole time, he's dealing with two people who are doing vastly different things, and he's just using Snape so that he can make Harry's life better. That's all he's doing. And then in the end, he's realizing that maybe I didn't have to use him this way the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I have so many issues with Dumbledore towards the end of the books. And the way that he goes about his mission, as he sees it, I just think is so problematic. He talks about this idea of power and great responsibility and all that kind of thing. It's very Spider-Man, and he really has a set idea of what must happen, and he pulls all the strings to make sure it does happen, and that includes making Snape aware of what is going to happen and making Snape feel guilt, I think, for Lily's death, and trying to manipulate him using that. But ultimately, they don't have to treat Harry in this way. And if you talk to the kid, and if you tried to help him and guide him a little bit more and gave him more information and, you know, nurtured him a bit more, maybe you'd still get the same results. They both make mistakes, I think, in the way that they treat Harry throughout his time at Hogwarts. Snape's got other things clouding his judgment as well, but he's got this kind of overall idea of what's going on with Dumbledore. But yeah, the way that Dumbledore kind of doesn't tell him anything and then lumps it all on the end, it's storytelling, and it is kind of, you know, it's part of them being books. But ultimately, the pair of them become this wizard behind the curtain, both of them trying to succeed in achieving this overall grand plan, and not trusting in a person and a character, and allowing that character to make their own choices. And if anything that we should have learned is that choices are important, and that you can offer some guidance, but it's up to the person to make a choice. And they don't let Harry have these choices.
I think we came to this kind of conclusion on episode 184 too, the idea that the Dumbledore we see in this chapter is very much the Dumbledore that Aberforth describes to Harry, more so than perhaps we see him anywhere else in the series. And I think that's kind of what that Aberforth chapter is meant to do, is preface this Dumbledore. Because he does, you know, I noticed from my first read that he reads differently in this chapter than he does in many other passages of Harry Potter. Yeah. But because of the lead up to Aberforth's story, and because of the hints we've gotten before about that backstory, I think that's why that works in terms of Dumbledore. But Skigai, I know you've got other points about Snape, and I'd love to invite you to at least put forth one more before you go, because we do want to make sure and get some other listeners on here too.
Well, now all I can think about is Dumbledore. I completely agree with you, Rosie, forever. This reread has totally made me think of Dumbledore in a different way, though. And I think there was one point on the chapter that really wasn't discussed. It's kind of like the biggest point in the whole series, the pig for slaughter comment. Because I really thought about that a lot, and if you think that the pig for slaughter was a good thing to do, that kind of makes you rethink of how you think about Dumbledore, because if you think that he thought Harry had to die, how do you really tell him anything for as long as humanly possible? Like, what could he possibly have said to make anything better?
You know, because there were I saw some comments on this already on this week's show about that maybe Dumbledore wasn't in the wrong to do the pig for slaughter thing, and that really I think the what's I've seen pulled from the listener comments too about that is that, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I saw it mostly in the comments, was that Snape manages to transcend this knowledge and still continue his mission, knowing that his overall, like in his head, from his perspective, because he doesn't know everything at this point, and he just knows, he thinks Harry's gonna die, that he has essentially failed his mission to Lily, and he's I think that's what speaks to Snape's maturity, because in that moment, because he manages to go past that knowledge and actually end up doing what's for the greater good, in kind of Dumbledore's new sense of what the greater good means. And I do think Dumbledore very clearly explains why he couldn't bring himself to tell Harry these things early on in Order of the Phoenix. The idea that, you know, Harry was just a child, and Dumbledore, up to that point, thought that he could do that, like that he could just be like, well, you have to die, so too bad. And he couldn't manage it. Like, he actually got attached to Harry as a person, and as he said, that's the flaw in his plan, is that he grew to love Harry in a way. It's kind of the flaw of all the plans, and also the succeeding piece of all the plans, is that love ends up being a component in all of them.
I do think it's interesting that it is Snape that picks up on the pig for slaughter thing, though. Like, Dumbledore talks about it as a sacrifice, but it is Snape that says, hang on a second, you are treating a child as if they are already dead. And I think that does speak to Snape's childhood and to what he had to live through, and to the reasons why he went and managed to find Lily and was looking for a friend and all of that kind of stuff. He didn't get the childhood that he wanted, and he has watched Harry have some aspect of childhood. He's seen that, you know, he was mistreated by the Dursleys as well. He doesn't necessarily treat him well himself, and that is Snape's failing. But he does recognize that Harry is at least happy at Hogwarts. And whilst he does try to bring him down a few pegs, he doesn't ever actively try and make it miserable to the point of extreme. He does try and save his life several times. He does protect Harry from some horrible things. He abuses his power as a teacher, and he definitely doesn't, you know, treat him as he should treat his students. But he does also let him be a child and let him have a life, and prepare him for a life outside of Hogwarts, which he now realizes that Dumbledore was never doing. Dumbledore was only letting him prepare for this one final moment. And I think it's the feeling of being cheated that Snape is familiar with and therefore reacts against. And I think that is to his credit, that he would actually stand up and say, what you're doing is not right. You are treating Harry like a pig for slaughter. How could you have done that to him?
So yeah. we have a Q&A comment, and Connor, you can stay for this if you'd like, from that's been voted up by you guys, from Jordan Richardson, who asked, and it kind of goes off of the Dumbledore stuff and a little more into Snape. Do you think that the Severus Albus memories could be evidence that Severus has actually been reflecting on his life and the mistakes he has made?
Good question.
It's an excellent question.
I certainly think so. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. How could he not? I mean, he hates everything. He hates losing Lily, so he must think about that all the time. That would be my answer.
Do you, I guess, okay, because this goes along too with the major discussion in the comments about, did Snape learn from his mistakes? Did he mature? Was his mission always for Lily? Did it ever end up being about Harry at any point? And Connor, what are your feelings about Snape's, I guess, growth and maturity?
I think his tragedy is that he never learns from his mistakes, and he so desperately wants to. but he doesn't even recognize what his mistakes are, so he can't really ever fix them. So it just makes him such a sad character and such a sympathetic character to me, because he so desperately wants to make things better, he just has no idea how. He's just completely on the opposite side of how you would want to approach that.
I think he does learn something from his mistakes, because he's learned that he's ruined his life. You know, he never repairs his mistakes, but he does take something from them. And I think, you know, when we see that final showdown where he flees the castle, with the flight and looking like a bat and all that kind of stuff, he appears to flee to Voldemort, but Voldemort then says, you know, bring me Snape. So there is some distance between him actually running away and actually getting to Voldemort to be killed. And that distance strikes me as Snape knowing he's been defeated within Hogwarts, but not wanting to join the other side. And I don't think we ever see him fighting in this battle. He's not the kind of person who is throwing spells around. He's not trying to hurt the kids. He's not trying to do anything that will actually cause destruction within Hogwarts. I think we see him, I don't know if it's movieism or if it's bookism, sorry. We see him batting away some spells. I think McGonagall tries to fight him and he doesn't fight back.
Oh yeah, that's a movieism, because I guess their encounter comes in a hallway before everybody's in the Great Hall in the book. Yeah, in the movie, it's in front of everybody and it's this big grand to do. But yeah, no, in the book, and we actually talked about that on the episode of the possibility that Snape didn't even want to have that confrontation with McGonagall, and he only kind of played it up to keep his role going, and keep his disguise up. But he jumps out of that battle really quickly. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think that's definitely correct.
And the fact that he does jump out so quickly and he doesn't immediately go back to the Death Eaters, he doesn't join their side, strikes me as meaning that, you know, he didn't want to be on that side. He has been playing two sides for a long time. He's been feeding information to Dumbledore, and while he's been headmaster, he's actually been trying to protect the kids. We've got the Carrows there who are causing all ends of trouble, but Snape himself hasn't seemingly been torturing the kids. So I think during that time, he may have gone back up to the headmaster's office, and he may have been talking to the portraits. He may be preparing either to die or to tell Harry what's going on. Or I love the idea of Harry going up and it all being prepared, ready for him, as if Snape had known that it was going to go that way. But I don't think Snape wanted to fight in this battle at all. So I think he would have spent that time being apart from the battle rather than in it.
And that brings up a point that was asked of me quite a few times in the comments this week, because one of the battles that Snape does participate in is the Seven Potters battle. And he saves Lupin's life. And a question that was asked to me was, well, isn't Snape a hero in your eyes, or at least a good guy in your eyes, Michael, because he saved Lupin?
I said that facetiously.
Yeah, but it was a good question, and I'm really glad you asked it, because I think there were a lot of people who did wonder, like, why I didn't even touch on that point in the discussion. One, it was because we had so many points to get through, and unfortunately, like, that's such a quick thing that happens in the chapter. But and as I answered on the main site, for me, that's just that's too easy to forgive Snape for one action. I believe that Lupin would be very grateful to Snape had he known what happened. Yeah. Lupin might even consider Snape heroic for that, or to be a hero for that, and I would actually disagree with Lupin, if that were ever to come up, and if these people were real and I could talk to them, which would be so nice. I think in a way it's just that I compared it actually to Harry saving Malfoy during the Battle of Hogwarts, and that, as far as we know through Rowling and through very definitively through the epilogue, Harry and Malfoy have this very curt relationship with each other, like a kind of an acquaintance where if they happen to see each other, they kind of nod their heads and that's it. But it's not like they go out of their way to talk to each other, interact with each other in any way, because there is so much history that doesn't make that possible for them to turn. Malfoy doesn't hero worship Harry in any way, or spread his accolades as far as we know, which is funny because and I'm sure we'll get to that discussion more in the epilogue, because while Harry doesn't kind of do that with Malfoy, considering that Malfoy did not kill Dumbledore and kind of had his change of heart. Harry does not do that for Malfoy, but he does do that for Snape in many ways. He names his child after him. And
Snape did a lot more for Harry than Draco, though.
For sure, to be fair, for sure. It makes, to me, and that makes sense. It does make sense, but I just find it interesting that there is that comparison there of kind of how much, and that comes down to a lot of the discussion we've been having in the comments too. Is what is how many good deeds do you have to do to gain good graces with somebody? How many actions towards to save your love's son do you have to do before it's okay? It's very interesting that there's kind of a barometer for all of these things, and everybody, I think, definitely in the comments and in the Snape debate as a whole has a different barometer of how that fits.
The good comparison for that is Petunia, I think, and you guys can talk about that if you want. I just really quickly wanted to just say that Rosie was right on everything she just said. I meant on Snape's, what he doesn't understand, the mistakes he makes, just specifically to Lily, because I don't think he really understands why that went wrong. I don't think he really ever grasps that it was because he went to on a darker path. Just wanted to point that out. And also, the room was not set up for Harry. The pensieve was tucked away in his closet where it's always been. It says so in the book, and you guys said that on the podcast, and it's a movie, it does not happen that way in the book.
Yep. I remember that as soon as you guys said it. It's amazing the thing when you're on a 2-hour podcast and you're on a time limit. You literally can just read the chapter right before you record and then be
completely done.
Those movies, man, they have really messed with my head. There are so many scenes that I actually flat out forget happened in the book sometimes because the movie version just has become so iconic, for sure. But yes, no, that I think was an excellent point to bring up as far as kind of where how much
nice idea
was. Yeah, no, it was a little, yeah. Well, and I still think that doesn't necessarily negate the idea that Snape had to have had some kind of alternate plan to get the memories to Harry. I'm sure his ideal setup was not bleeding on the floor of the Shrieking Shack, forcing his memories out of his ears. That's probably not what he was hoping to do. And it's great that you brought up Petunia, Connor, because that was definitely another big
thing that we're
discussion as far as, because I put forth the question of whether Petunia and Snape were perhaps culpable in each other's personalities and how they turned out later on in life, if they maybe had some involvement in each other's development. The shame is that I actually didn't, and I had wanted to discuss this, and the topic went another way, but what I had wanted to bring up too, because we talked so much about, in the comments, there was a lot of comments talking about Snape's parentage and how he, disliked his father, and because of that had a stronger attachment to his mother. But it was funny because I was thinking in terms actually of Lily and Petunia's parents, who they're so inconsequential in the text that we don't even get a physical description of them when we see them.
Potters. We know that they're old, but we don't know anything more than that.
Yes, they're there, but we have no idea what they look like. But it's interesting because there was a lot of discussion this week in the comments about why Snape turned out the way he did, and if his parents had something to do with that in his home life. And I thought it would have been interesting to kind of look at, too, why why Lily and Petunia turn out the way they do, from a parenting aspect, because as many people pointed out, there was kind of a debate on between Snape and Petunia who threw the first punch. And textually, I believe it's Petunia, because she actually points out that Snape comes from the wrong side of the tracks. And where does a belief like that come from for a girl who's about 11, like 9, 10, 11 years old?
From British people being told to always be careful of strangers.
And that's totally possible. That's totally possible, because if Spinner's End is kind of an iffy part of town, that definitely could be construed that way. I think, though, textually, it also does match up with Petunia's kind of disdain for different classes of people.
Yeah. And I think that really develops in Petunia's character, and if we're talking about Snape not maturing and not growing up in these relationships, Petunia definitely keeps that immaturity level all the way through into her adult life. She never overcomes her preconceptions about people, and I do think that her relationship with Severus informs that. She had a bad idea, bad things happened, and therefore that idea was reinforced and continues and continues. And I think that's part of what you were reading from a J.K. Rowling comment, that she meets Vernon and it just gets worse from there. But I do think...
Does it make it okay? No. Just as much as it doesn't make it okay with Snape, it does not make it okay with Petunia either. I think you can, perhaps in a way, though, I think what's interesting about the contrast and the parallels between the two of them is that, in a way, you can almost find, and there's a newfound sympathy for Petunia, the realization that she watched her sister have this ability that we all as readers crave to have. Who didn't want their Hogwarts letter at age 11? And Petunia actually writes to Dumbledore and tries to get to go to Hogwarts, and he very nicely explains why she can't. And which is interesting, because it does bring up this whole kind of sub theme about squibs that kind of gets started with Filch in Chamber of Secrets, and continues with Mrs. Figg, and then again is brought up with Petunia.
And Mariana, considering
yes,
that Dumbledore
absolutely.
was the one that wrote the letter, it's interesting that he would write to Petunia in particular when the death of his sister and the hiding of the non-magical powers and all that kind of thing, and also his sympathies of Muggles. He is very aware that Muggles attacked his sister. His father attacked those Muggles. His father went to jail, but his sister's life was ruined. But the sympathy for non-magical folk still exists, and he still sees this great desire of wanting magic and of wanting to be special. And he does that brilliant teacher thing of making Petunia feel special even if she doesn't manage to get the magic. Obviously, because she doesn't get to go to school, and she sees how Lily does develop and does become so powerful and does become more of a freak, that makes the distance greater. But the fact that Dumbledore actually wrote the letter, and the fact that he tried, and the fact that she got a response and remembered that response all those years later with that another letter, proves how much that actually meant to her. She
Some might say she
learn
was
from that.
obsessed.
Yeah, you might say she was obsessed. It's interesting to see the different progression between Petunia and Severus. They both started in the same town. They both experienced the same loss of Lily. They both had very different paths, and they both kind of hated each other because of this fundamental prejudice. but it's interesting because it's the same prejudice but from either side. Petunia doesn't like Snape because he has magic. Snape doesn't like Petunia because she doesn't. I think Leah Hayward said, I think Snape definitely helped to break the sisterly bond between Petunia and Lily. And I do think that is true, but I think that that bond was weakened by the presence of magic in the first place. I don't think that it was Snape's presence that effectively broke it. I think it was Petunia's jealousy that was the one that actually broke it. His insistence of knowing about magic and his very childish way of trying to make friends and trying to only make friends with the right people causes a bigger rift between the girls. But I don't think Lily would ever let that get too far, and I think Lily would have tried to keep Petunia on her side, but it would be Petunia's self-fulfilling prophecies and Petunia's kind of obsession with the lack of magic and the need to be normal because I am normal, I don't have magic, therefore I must be normal. That causes that divide between the sisters.
Shout out to all you listeners who are watching us right now and viewers. Reminder too, you can, if you would like to join us in the conversation, let us know in the Q&A section because that's kind of the part we're watching right now.
Yes.
And we can get you on here just like Connor is here right now joining us. We can also get you on. You don't have to use your camera. You can actually take your camera out and just use your sound if you would prefer. But we also would love to see you on your camera if you'd like to join us that way too. That's just fine, and bring your thoughts on Snape as well, because we definitely want to. We know you all wanted to have your say, and we definitely want to give you the space to do that. And the way that we'll do that is that if you let us know that you would like to join us, Rosie will add you to the Alohomora Google Circles. And then you can and then you'll be able to accept an invite through your Google page to get to us and join us that way.
Just real quickly back on the Petunia thing, I totally agree with what Rosie was saying, and the jealousy makes it very hard for me to sympathize her because she still holds on to it. Still, she never ever lets it go. And she's letting Snape bully her all the way through her 40s. I mean, that's just insanity. And it was interesting you compared the two because they both have vastly different backgrounds, though. Petunia seemingly came from a perfectly fine household, whereas Snape did not. So Petunia, where did Petunia turn into this person?
I think, Petunia turns into this person, like, just because they come from different backgrounds doesn't necessarily mean they can't have similar paths in their development, and I think that comes from not only from her brief encounters with Snape, which I think are more affecting to her because of what happens to her relationship with Lily, not necessarily Snape himself. Because as we see when they depart on the train platform, the thing that Petunia is shocked about is that Lily reads her diary. And while that's kind of a very sisterly thing to occur, it's kind of implied that that's never happened before and that Snape influenced Lily to do that, at least in Petunia's eyes. And Snape, is more and more just continually becoming this negative for Lily. She doesn't really, in the end, what she sees is a wizard influencing her sister to become something she doesn't recognize after already, in a way, losing something about her sister as far as her being non-magical and Lily having magic. And so I think that's, as Rosie said, it's that, and as you said, Connor, that obsession, that kind of lingering resentment, which again is why it doesn't make it okay, because just like with Snape, this obsession and this resentment piece ends up being taken out on Harry. He's kind of the brunt for a lot of adults' behavior. So it's even though those different backgrounds occurred, I think there's still potential for them to have those. Just because Petunia was more privileged doesn't necessarily mean she didn't have conflict or strife in a similar way.
Yeah, and I think Petunia is a really interesting example of wealth being a problem, not just poverty. We see a lot of broken homes and a lot, you know, we've got all of these similar boys. We've got Harry, we've got Snape, we've got Tom Riddle himself, we've got all of them having to make choices and the different paths that they take to become who they become. From very similar starts, they become very different people. And on the flip side of that, we have Petunia, who had all of the benefits of a perfectly good home at the beginning, but certain things go wrong and she can't get over them. And we've got, you know, characters like Draco who have all of the possibilities that they could ever possibly want, and misuse that wealth and misuse that privilege. And I think that's one of the most important things to Jo, is to explore all facets of life, and to explore similar characters and to try and show that, you know, it doesn't matter where you started. It matters what you do with your life, and it matters what you do with your choices, and it matters how you treat people. Petunia is a villainous character because of how she treats Harry, in the same way that Snape is a villainous character because of how he treats Harry. They both make mistakes. Whether they overcome them is up to debate, as we're proving. We see moments with Petunia where she's regretting, perhaps, the way that she's always treated Harry, and that she recognizes that she wouldn't ever treat Dudley that way, and she recognizes that she would like to repair some of the relationship, perhaps, towards the end. It's interesting that it's Dudley that is the one that actually goes that extra step of, you know, why isn't Harry coming with us? To prove that even though he has now had that upbringing of Petunia and Vernon, he is making the right choice. He was the bully. He is overcoming that. And it's interesting that it's a generational thing as well, that it's the flaws of our parents that help us become better people, not always their brilliantness. And Snape,
Rosie,
yes.
I just want to make sure you know, Stephanie K has said she would love to join at any point.
Yes,
I think
I've tried to send her an
McLean
invite.
did too.
She's trying to. So I don't. You said you said. Okay, Stephanie K. Just so you know, we've seen that you want to join. Check out the Google. Check out your Google page. Check out your Gmail. Is that how you got in, Connor?
I just what did I do? I think I went to just my account page on Google, and it like something popped up
There was
and
something
said,
there.
"Do you want this?"
Okay, good. That's what I thought should happen. So, yes, as you can see, listeners, we're not exactly experts on this.
I don't understand the circle thing at all. Where did they come up with that term?
I
Gotta
think
love,
it's because of
gotta
the
love
O's
Google.
in the Google. They wanted to make it something to do with that. I don't know.
So yes, we'll work on getting Stephanie in here.
Sabrina is also
Asking to come on. Yes, I see that. So here we go.
Do we want
Rosie,
to talk
you're
about
lagging.
Jordan Richardson's? Ooh. I think it's because I'm trying to do other things at the same time.
Probably.
Are you talking about after all this timeline?
No, the discussion of James. We'll come back to Petunia in a
I see it.
second. Can you see it in blue?
Oh,
You
thank
guys discuss that while I'm sorting this out.
Sure. So Jordan Richards is on that front. Don't forget James, whose family has much wealth and presumably influence. In the beginning, he's an, quote, arrogant toe rag. He is the star quarterback who has everything and thinks he is entitled to the girl. So yeah, James was also a big hot topic of discussion, and I think he ends up coming up a lot in terms of kind of comparing him and Snape and how their development occurs and why Lily chose one over the other. You know, that the disadvantage that I guess James has textually is that the one time we see him in his youth, he is very, 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 very bad. And he's actually taking it out on Snape. And up till then, we had these kind of wonderful images of James, and from that point on, we really only get other characters' impressions of James, and then what many fans I think consider a throwaway line, which is that James just matured in year 7, and then Lily dated him, and it was fine. Which has opened a lot of discussion and a lot of fan fiction about the idea that Lily perhaps maybe just settled for James, that James stole her, that Snape somehow still had a chance with Lily around this time, and that James should be held as perhaps as much to blame for his behavior as Snape for his. And Connor, what do you think about that with James?
I believe when I think Lupin says that he matures, and I totally buy that. It really was a mistake for Rowling not to write something else in there for us readers to latch onto, because I really hate James. I mean, just that one scene really makes me hate him. I mean, I know he changes, but man, there's just nothing good to latch onto really, other than he's a good Quidditch player, and then he's Lily's husband. I mean, it would have been nice to have a little bit more there for sure.
Yeah, I think that the stereotypical dislikable jock is perhaps one of the most unlikable images in literature. And James isn't the only person like that we see. I don't think really anybody particularly likes Cormac McLaggen as a person.
No.
He is a hilarious character, but he is an awful, awful human being, and in many ways James was a lot like that from the little that we get to see of James at that age. But at the same time, I like that we don't see more, in the respects that it causes Harry to, and by proxy the reader, to really have that kind of crisis and that reassessment of who his parents were.
Yeah.
Because up till book 5, they are just kind of these perfect angels who did no wrong. And while Lily doesn't necessarily get taken far down from that, I think it's important that James does, because James, despite that, is still a really important source of protection for Harry, too, as evidenced by his Patronus. And that's something that I think Harry has to wrestle with. I have a feeling that there will be some wrestling with that in Cursed Child. I'm not sure. According to the summary, anyway.
I like the point of Jordan's question, in that James does change, even though he comes from a different background than the other characters we were talking about. Because I think that was a big topic in the forums, in that I think Kat said that Snape, that just lots of bigots mostly don't change. And I think a lot of people took issue with that, because I think the books show time and time again that you can change, and lots of people do change in the books. And I think to say that that's probably not going to happen for him was a big stretch. So that was probably one of the most debated statements of the podcast was bigots and racists. What happens to them? And there were actually lately in the comments there have been a lot of thoughts brought out on both sides of that argument, that the idea that people like that maybe don't change, or that people still have those views ingrained in them and maybe don't necessarily see them as wrong, but still manage to see the world in a different way, that they can change. I think the most, there's a lot to unpack there. I think the most important thing for me is that the books define that there are choices to be made, despite how you are ingrained with those beliefs. There come points in your life where you have to make a choice of whether you continue to believe those things or whether you learn to open your eyes and see things differently. And I think that's
that one's a hard one because that's such a just like love, that's such a personal experience for every individual.
And I totally get that, but Roland has the whole story of Ron, who is a bigot, and Hermione changes him. So I think she's trying to lead us down the path. That's really where the story was kind of leading for Snape, I think, is what she was trying to say.
That's a really interesting idea that Ron's story is meant to parallel that. You know, because what's interesting about Ron too is there's a lot of things about Ron that don't change throughout the series, or that take time to change. You know, Ron doesn't truly come out of this way of thinking for a good 7 years in this, and he's only kind of just starting to understand it when he in book 7.
I think he starts to understand it in book 6. I think the moments where we see him kind of starting to think about girls and starting to realize actually even in you know, there are moments at the Yule Ball where, you know, when Hermione insults him for the first time, he must go away and think about that. He must really kind of think about, why was she so upset? Why did she say I should have asked her first? They've got an awkwardness after that moment that proves that Ron is thinking about things a little bit more. It takes him a long time to develop enough to actually understand what he wants to achieve out of all that change in opinion.
Past the emotional range of the teaspoon.
Yeah, he has to go through all of the different measuring spoon sizes to get to the right one. But, you know, that's how some people grow, and it's how some people develop. And he still has a long way to go before he can give up all of his ideas. And I think that's part of the kind of, you know, pure blood shelteredness, all of that kind of thing. He has had not a very rich in terms of wealth, but a very rich in terms of loving childhood, where he hasn't really had to think too complexly about the world. And when he does start to encounter things that challenge him, he does think about it, and he does go away, and it takes him some time, but eventually he comes up with the right solution. And that's a good thing. And I think Snape necessarily doesn't do the same things. He sees this challenge, and he uses Slytherin cunning, and he tries to find a solution to the challenge that is not necessarily beneficial to everyone. He finds the best solution for him and doesn't think about the consequences.
Right. So, oh, hello.
Hey, we got
Stephanie?
another one in here. Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi, we can
Hello,
see
Stephanie.
and hear you. Welcome
Nice
to the
see you
conversation.
guys.
Yes, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
Before Stephanie, we get to you. I think Connor, you had one more response.
I just wanted to ask Rosie the question that you guys asked each other in the podcast. If Snape was sort of in Gryffindor and became, or was with Lily a lot longer, would he have changed?
If Snape had been sorted into Gryffindor, he would be a very different person, because he wouldn't have had the very close roommate relationship of the Slytherin dorms, and he would have had the benefit of kind of a tempered dorm situation. However, if he were sorted into Gryffindor and everything else stayed the same and that was the only change, he would have more time with Lily, but that would also put him in the same dorm room as James and Sirius and Remus and Peter, and then he would be the fifth one. He would be the Neville in that situation. He would be the one that's left out, and he would still not have quite as much of the same benefit. He's always going to have that distance because of his upbringing. He may have bonded with Sirius because they would have had a very similar story of being Slytherins that had been sorted into Gryffindor. But there would be something else that's needed to make it a solid change that would have been beneficial for him, probably, I think.
I was gonna say, or would there be a Parent Trap moment, and they'd be like sitting together in their dorm, they'd be like, I like peanut butter on Oreos too, and then like all of a sudden, like, would there be a moment of like relatability that would ever come about, like not necessarily peanut butter and Oreos, but something that would be recognized between them that would ever change that? don't know about that for sure. That's that's why we have fan fiction, I guess. So, but Stephanie, now that you're here and in on the conversation, what did you have any specific points you wanted to touch on?
I totally was wanted to join in for the whole Petunia conversation.
What would you like?
We're going to go back to it. So this is the great Snape debate. We're managing to talk about everyone.
No, it's. I mean, it brings.
I think
both
we
of
got
them
all
in,
our frustrations out on the comments. Is what Stephanie's trying to say.
No, I just kind of want to bring up. I just think Petunia kind of has, and I'm one, but I think she has classic first child syndrome, which is something. I mean, I am totally fine admitting it, but you can totally be like jealous of a younger sibling because they have something that you don't have. So I think even if they never met Snape, I think that Petunia and Lily kind of would have broken apart because I think Petunia would have always just been jealous.
I totally agree. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that's developed through what we see in the Prince's Tale, just purely through their interactions, because Petunia seems to have an equal amount of admiration and cautiousness about magic. She finds it simultaneously appealing and frightening, almost in the way that since she has that equal balance, that it could go both ways for her at any point in her future. And again, I guess that once again goes back to the idea of choices that people make and how they approach things and how they behave, because Petunia makes a choice. I think by the time they're at platform 9 3/4 for Lily's first year, Petunia has definitely made her choice. So I think there is still that risk, definitely.
To try and bring it back to Snape, I think the first child syndrome and the only child syndrome are both things that are very present in the books. And the difference between being an only child and having siblings and having magical or non-magical siblings are also interesting issues that are explored. We'll have to do an episode on siblings in the future when we get onto new format, which will be very exciting. If you guys haven't seen the new format video, that when we're kind of talking about stuff, check out. That was very enigmatic, talking about stuff.
I'm
go
still
and
very
check out
excited.
our Twitter and our Facebook and watch our future plans video, because it's all very sad and we are ending. Yes.
I was very confused by your Twitter post, by the way. You said sad because I was a Patreon member and I saw it before. It's like, something changed? Are they canceling?
Yeah, it is April after all. But yeah, I think the idea of siblings is interesting, and again, it comes down to Snape being an only child in a broken home and all of that kind of thing, where he is desperate for some kind of acknowledgement. He's desperate for some kind of affirmation that he is lovable, that he has something that is wanted by other people. And first child syndrome comes into that, where Petunia wants that as well. She wants to be special. She wants to be the first child. She wants to be as good as her little sister. But for Snape, it's very much in a case of he just wants to be as good as anyone. He wants to be acknowledged as being something that is worth being on this earth. And it takes him finding Lily to get that acknowledgement. He has a close relationship with his mother, but that's within your own family. He wants someone of his own age that will acknowledge him. And he finds that in Lily, and he doesn't seem to find that in any other person at school. When we see that clip back to the Marauders, where we see James being a total whatever, and we see the Marauders being so terrible to him, Snape is sitting there on his own. we've said that, you know, he's got the influence of the Slytherin dorms, and that Lily doesn't like the fact that he's friends with Avery and Mulciber and all of those lot. But he is there on his own. He's come out of an exam and he doesn't have anyone to talk to about it. So if Petunia has first child syndrome and is desperate to be loved and is desperate to be important, Snape just wants a connection. And he may seek that in the wrong place. You know, I would say a childhood friend is a good place to try and find that kind of connection. Lily, sadly for Severus, doesn't return that feeling because of things that Snape does wrong.
Well, and actually with that, Christina Karras had left a great comment a little farther back that said, "Can those who believe that Snape never knew Lily or who saw who she really was, please clarify that with some examples from the text? I read him as being attracted to her intelligence, her strength, her kindness, which are very substantive, not superficial."
I agree. Good comment.
That's an excellent comment. I think and actually I want to say we read out some of these passages on episode 184, but the one big passage that we read out was when when Lily and Snape are walking in the courtyard, and Lily is kind of trying to discuss with Snape about Mulciber and Avery, and Snape is actually not really listening to her about that particular piece, and that he's actually trying to make clear to her that a few things about Lupin and James. And I do think it's true. I think that Snape, I think this, like, for me personally, what I think contributes to Snape loving Lily, not just being obsessed with her, is that there are things that he sees about her. He sees her compassion, and I think a comment on the main site pointed out that Rowling actually tweeted to somebody that's part of Snape's tragedy, that he envies Lily's goodness, and that he doesn't know, but at the same time he never really ends up being a particular practitioner of that. But at the same time, I think Snape is missing something very fundamental about Lily by not listening to her. She's very much putting forth a viewpoint about the world, and in the end, that's what is the breaking point for her. It's not necessarily that she's leaving their friendship because he called her a mudblood. It's because she's seen this escalating over years, and he hasn't listened to her. And as she beautifully points out, like, why should I be the exception to the rule? Why does that make it okay? So I think that's the big piece that we're meant to take away about what he doesn't understand about Lily. And as you said, Connor, that's perhaps the thing that he just doesn't get for quite a while.
I do think he gets it eventually, though, and I think
he
that
does.
is his biggest regret.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he realizes how bad things get, and he doesn't want to be part of that side anymore. And I think he wishes that he had listened to Lily, and that part of the reason why he is still in love with her is because he knows deep down that she was right. He was a kid. He didn't listen. He followed along with those that had power. He sought the connection of people that were acknowledging him, and that saw him as a human being that had some worth to them. And I think that is a danger in our own world as well. Gonna bring the conversation into a very negative place, but with all kind of grooming and with all the kind of negative stuff that goes on in the world, vulnerable kids are vulnerable. They have vulnerabilities that the wrong people know how to manipulate. And I do think that is what happened to Severus. I think he was brought into a bad crowd and didn't think of it as a bad crowd. He thought of it as, these people actually know what I've been through. These people acknowledge my story and don't say that it's wrong, but they agree with some of the thoughts that I've had. They may be extreme thoughts, but they are still my thoughts. And that is how a lot of extremism in the world is currently happening, is people are being groomed because they have opinions that are not being acknowledged in any way, or not being challenged, or not being discussed, and they get affirmed by other people, and those people are the reason why those thoughts develop. And Severus is a clear example of that happening. He doesn't listen to the one voice of reason because he's got all of these other voices that are agreeing with him, and that is a more powerful feeling than anything. To be acknowledged and to be considered to be correct is a better feeling than being told that you're wrong. And he's always going to have gone with the people that were giving him a safe space to be him. And sadly, that leads to everything else that happens. But overall, you know, that was the path that was always going to happen if no one intercepted, and it needed to be an adult. It needed to be someone with more power than just one 15-year-old girl. And that is why everything happened.
Rosie, if I wasn't worried I'd destroy your eardrums, I would totally clap. That's what we wanted to hear on the podcast so badly.
Well, yeah.
Back to the point you brought up, that they're walking, and what are they arguing about again? I forget. Lily and Snape. Michael.
They're arguing about what I believe Avery or Mulciber did to Mary by using dark magic on her, and it's ostensibly Mary is a pretty good friend of Lily's from what we get.
Well, the scene is set up. To me, it feels like they've had these walk and talks countless times, and why would Lily keep having them if Snape hasn't been listening to her? I understand that the text really doesn't state specifically that Snape has been listening, but I think subtextually you're supposed to kind of realize that he's been listening to her this whole time. There's just this one thing that's driving them apart that he's not listening about and he's not getting. Because I really feel like there's a whole history there that it's there, but it's just not specifically written onto the page. Because when I read it, I feel that way just automatically, that they've had this whole history together.
Well, I think the listening is. I think we see that he listened because in the end, his final memory, as many comments pointed out, is that he scolds Phineas Nigellus's portrait for using the term mudblood, and he kind of says don't use that word. And I think a lot of people, myself included, take that as, you know, that's a big part of Snape that changed through his love of Lily. And the thing is, I actually don't think that I agree with many of the comments that Snape's bigotry and racism really was just, like you were saying, Rosie, a product of his vulnerability, and that he wanted to be part of a group, and that in a way he didn't necessarily even believe those things. He just wanted to be part of something. And he sees the massive consequences of that when, by his actions, Lily gets killed. It's the thing that she warned him about kind of coming true. So I do think he was listening, but I mean, he didn't. The fact of the matter is, he didn't internalize it in time for Lily, and I think that's totally fair. I think if we say that's that Lily should have given him more of a chance, that's unfair to Lily, because if she has been giving this speech and Snape, despite that he may or may not be listening, has given her no indication as such for the last 5 years. I think what's so important about that, I feel I have a lot of personal experience with that, and I'm sure many of the listeners do, the idea that you might have a best friend who you always talk about with that friend. We're going to be best friends for life. We're going to stay together forever. Nothing can separate us. And then all of a sudden, you get to a point in life where you realize you're not best friends anymore. There's things about the two of you that have evolved, changed for good or bad, and that one of you or both of you recognize that you don't need each other in your lives anymore. And in Lily's case, I think what's really well developed in the book is that, in these memories, is that she needed Snape in her youth. She needed somebody to talk about magic with in the way that Snape let her talk about it before going to Hogwarts. She needed that invitation into the wizarding world, that kind of encouragement, because her magic was so powerful, and Petunia was so wary of it, and her family was asking her to hide it. But I think by their 5th year, Lily just very clearly lays out the difference between her and Snape, and why it's not going to work out between them even as friends. Rosie, I notice you've got a comment up here too. I think that was that a different one that you chose?
Hello?
Oh, I couldn't hear you for a second there.
I think
there you go.
My computer was trying to load a page again, and it doesn't like that.
Of course it was. You've got a different comment that you pulled from the Q&A, it looks like, at the top.
Yes. Just one that was kind of complementing what we were saying. So
Yes.
Jessica Crawford said, for a while Lily was the only person in the world who showed she cared for Severus without a truly selfish drive. She sees his life as hard and she is kind. At home he didn't really get that. At Hogwarts many of his crowd befriend him for his skill. And I just thought that was really indicative of Lily as a person as well, that the reason why Severus loves her so much, and I do believe that he did love her, is because she did show this kindness, and it was a pure kind of kindness, and it was the kind of relationship that, you know, we would all crave for from a friend, and that is why he latched onto that relationship so much, because he didn't get that from anywhere else. He didn't really get it at home. He doesn't get it from his actual friends at school because they all want him for his brilliant potion ability or his great skill at creating spells that, well, whether they knew that or not, we don't know. But he's obviously got great magical power, and that's what the Death Eaters, as they would be, are all latching onto. So, yeah, he is a tool in the chess game. That's mixing metaphors. He is a really important piece in the game, which is interesting if you're going to bring up that Ron comparison again. He is the one that is being manipulated. And I think that is part of the character growth that we do see from Severus, is that he goes from being manipulated and losing the thing that he holds most dear because of that manipulation, to become the one who does the manipulation. He loses everything, and so he uses the skill that was used against him to his advantage. And I think that is the key thing that we often forget about Severus. We say that he hasn't seemed to learn much, he hasn't he caused all of this heartache for himself, and that he, you know, some people think that he doesn't really deserve to go on beyond that, and therefore he is villainous and he does bad things. But he learns what was done to him, and he puts that back on other people. And that's obviously not a good thing to do, but it is a skillful and a cunning thing to do. And it shows that he has enough intelligence to be able to see what was wrong and to make other people pay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and before we go on, just a note, Rosie, I don't know if you saw, but Leah Haywood has also asked to join the chat at some point, and it would definitely be nice to.
Invite.
Leah, take a look at your Google page if you haven't already.
If you said that you want to join, do check your emails, check your Gmails, check anything. I'm trying to send you kind of multiple ways of joining in. It doesn't seem to be working. I'm really sorry.
And that's why when you see Rosie's computer slowed, like her feed slowed down,
Yeah.
it's because she's trying to talk to us.
I'm trying to get you in.
Yeah, no, that bled into another conversation that I was on the forums. There was quite a bit of talk about it on the show, a little bit of talk about it in the comments, and then it kind of like devolved to the point that people felt that this was an excuse to see Snape as a bad person and not as a good one, and that was how Snape treats students, and that is such and I think a lot of us who either have kids or work with kids get really titchy about that subject, because I actually went into work. I work at a children's museum here in Texas, and I was talking to all of my staff about the episode, and my fellow staff about it, and they were all saying, "Oh no, Snape, no, we can't condone him as a good person." It was everybody I talked to on staff, and the same reason was brought up: the treatment of children. While I do think that's definitely a popular thing to reference, I don't think that makes it any less valid, because I think the part that makes Snape so frustrating is that, I mean, the epitome of it to me is the fact that he is Neville's Boggart in book 3.
Yeah.
To get to a level where you are actually somebody's greatest fear, that's very extreme. And somebody in the comments actually brought up the question of if there were actually a dearth, now using that word correctly, unlike what I did on the podcast, if there were a dearth of potioneers after Snape's time at Hogwarts, because nobody wanted to take potions, because he put people off of it. And I can't speak to that, but I know that people were saying that there were so-and-so this many people who were in the OWL level and NEWT level potions classes. But I certainly don't think Snape really inspired that much love for potions in his students. And a lot of people talked about, well, Snape was very much an individual who went off of the book. He didn't just subscribe to the book, which is why Hermione perhaps has a trouble with potions. Yeah, I know. I still don't think that's enough of an excuse. By the way, who do we have here with us?
I believe this is Leah.
Well, Leah,
you said but now you muted yourself again.
Hit that little microphone button, Leah, and then that should take you off of mute.
Okay, I got it.
Yep, there you are. We've got you. Hi. So glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's exciting.
So, what were some points you were hoping to add to the discussion, Leah?
Well, when you were talking about James, I put it in the Q&A, but I don't think you guys saw it, that basically James's Patronus and Lily's Patronus complement each other, being a stag and a doe. The way I see Snape's love as being more obsessive is that his Patronus exactly replicates Lily's, doesn't complement it like James's does. I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
That's a really good point. I don't want to admit that, but it is.
That's a really interesting question, because, okay, the other example we have of that, I guess, is that both Lupin and Tonks's Patronuses are the same. Because Lupin's, as we got confirmation, is a wolf. Tonks's turns into a wolf. And I think... And Rosie, correct me if I'm wrong, or elaborate on this, because I think you've got a better handle on this, perhaps, of the narrative aspect. But I think Lupin and Tonks are that Patronus bit is meant to be the lead up to Snape's Patronus, essentially.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That we have that background information of why Tonks's Patronus changes, so that we understand why it's so significant that Severus is a doe. But I do think that it has an aspect of, yeah, the stag and the doe do complement each other, and that is really important, and that is, you know, the Patronus represents yourself. If you are in need of protection, then the thing that you kind of embody will be the thing that comes out to protect you. If you then have a very strong connection with something else, that something else is your guardian, then that almost becomes your Patronus. This is how I kind of understand it. So for Harry, the thing that is protecting him is his knowledge of being like his father. Therefore, his Patronus is the stag, which is like his father. For Tonks, the thing that she really, really cares about at that moment and would like to protect, or feels protected by, is Remus. You know, she wants to shield him from the world, so he becomes this focus of protection. So it would be interesting to then think about what having the doe means for Severus. Is it just a reflection of the fact that he has this obsession about Lily, that he loves Lily, and that he holds Lily as this figure close to his heart? Or is it that he only feels safe when in connection with Lily? So Lily is his guardian. Lily is the one that will protect him from Dementors. Lily is the one that will protect his heart from all of the negative things that are going on around him. And if that's the case, I don't see it as copying Lily. I see it as a tribute to Lily. James and Lily have this very strong relationship. They complement each other. They don't need anyone else to protect them. They work together as a unit. But these other people have more symbolic Patronuses because they have other elements at work.
Marie Topfer pointed out in the Q&A that by that hand too, Harry and Snape's Patronuses complement each other. So isn't that interesting? I'd see, and that it's not because let's see, I lost it in the Q&A, but I think it was, let's see, oh, there's so many of you and that's so wonderful, but I keep getting everybody's stuff lost. Jessica Crawford asked, do you think Snape's Patronus was always a doe, or do you think it changed to replicate Lily's at some point? And that, I mean, that's a big question itself, because one, we don't know when Snape learned how to do a Patronus and when he first used one. Ostensibly, it was later on in his Hogwarts years, if they taught that academically, which I guess would be one of the most likely places for him to have learned it. But the thing, too, as far as, even in my personal headcanon, I don't really understand how Patronuses work in that respect, because I have to wonder, did Tonks's Patronus ever change back to what it was before it was a wolf? Did James's Patronus change into a doe's because his, and did Lily's change into a stag because it was that their love for each other that changed their Patronuses? Nobody ever says what happened. Happens with Patronuses after the fact. Does Harry's ever change to reflect Ginny? Does his turn into a horse? So there's, I think, a lot of complications with the Patronus concept that leave it open to that kind of interpretation that you're presenting, Leah. That idea that it's just that it's a copy, and what does that maybe represent? So, and Leah, I know you're very much in the kind of a similar camp of obsession versus love. Do you have any further kind of proof contributions to that idea?
I think I actually talked to Guy about this quite a bit in the comments time. Switch and Flick 27, if you remember me. But it's basically just from experience, I think, that, you know, obsessive, having experienced more obsessive kind of love. You put that person on a pedestal, and I see Snape as doing that with Lily, and I don't see that his feelings ever develop past that. He always sees her as this perfect person. He never recognizes any of her flaws. Whereas I think James does. He recognizes that she's a very independent person, and maybe that's why his Patronus doesn't copy hers.
Yeah, that's a possibility. And it's hard, that's again hard to say because we don't, other than kind of secondhand accounts, we never see Lily and James really together, so we don't really, other than a kind of a few snippets of imagery. I mean, not to say that I don't believe that the relationship was true, and because I do believe it was. But yeah, that's it. I still don't think that the obsession and the love are exclusive. I think they are tied together in a way. But I think the love for Lily is there because of what she did for him. But I think the obsession is there in that he did never let it go. He let that rule his life, and I think the extreme circumstance of that hopefully none of us can speak to, is that he got her killed. That's kind of the part that amplifies that, the idea that he had a direct hand in Lily's demise. Which makes
on the Patronuses, real quick, Rowling says that they represent hope, and both Tonks and Snape are hoping that they can get this person back in their lives, because at the time Lupin is really distancing himself from Tonks, and obviously Lily's dead. So, and with Harry, he's hoping to have a connection with his dead father, and so I think that's really more of what the Patronus is trying to reflect within yourself.
Yeah. And that works thematically as well, hope conquering fear. So.
Right. Exactly. And on the obsessive love, I think it's definitely obsessive love, but I don't think that discounts as real love. I think Snape really has so many different feelings that you really can't just say it's this, and therefore we can say that about it. What I always say about Snape is that he's Voldemort and he's Harry. He really represents everything all at once, which is paradoxically amazing that she wrote it this way, which... For example, he has a trait of every single house. He's ambitious for Slytherin. He's brave for Gryffindor. He's loyal for Hufflepuff. He's loyal in that he does exactly what Dumbledore tells him to do without question, basically, almost. And he's certainly smart like Ravenclaw. He's everything that the whole series talks about all the time, all at once, which makes him right down the middle, which is why we always come back to whether he's good or bad, because really, he's right down the middle.
Definitely not easy to categorize.
Right.
There was a comment in the Q&A that says, I think as a kid reading the Harry Potter books, I just remember comparing Snape to mean teachers I had, which made me dislike him. Reading his character as an adult reader made my opinion evolve greatly. And I I really like that. The fact that we often talk about the fact that, these books work on so many levels, and the amount of detail that we can manage to go into to create these, this is now a 2-hour live chat, and our episodes go on forever. We edit down quite significantly what we actually talk about. The fact that we can go into so much detail about essentially kids' books proves that, you should reread these books. These are not books to read when you are a kid and then say, I've done that, I don't need to do it anymore. These are books that every single time you read them, you will come up with something that you hadn't necessarily thought of before. And every single one of the characters in these books, apart from perhaps kind of the caricature characters, especially like the Dursleys in the early books, they're not supposed to be looked into in too much depth at that moment. They were more kind of Roald Dahl characters. But as the books develop, as they mature, as these characters become more and more complex, you can't think about them as, here is a hero, here is an anti-hero, here is a villain, here is a good guy and a bad guy, and they are fighting each other. You have to think about them as, okay, if I were going to look at this person as if they were a real person in my world, in my life, how would I think about that person? Because they are complex living characters. And Joe has managed to put so much detail and so much thought into what they do. Or perhaps that's just us reading into it too much. But there is enough in there that we can read into it that much. And that is the beauty of the Harry Potter books, that we can read and read and read, and every single time our opinions will evolve. And that's why we do Alohomora. That's why we do these chats. That's why we love talking to you guys, and that's why we've asked for so many of your comments today, because we really want to know what you guys think, and we love having you guys here to talk to, so thank you very much for joining us. And it really is just that beauty of, it doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter what Michael thinks, it doesn't matter what any of us think. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, because everyone reads these characters in a different way. When you read it as a kid, it will be different from how you're reading it now. Your life experience will make you interpret these characters and these things in a different way. And everyone is valid. Every single interpretation is perfectly fine. It's just down to what it means to you. And don't let anyone tell you that you're wrong, because whether you like him or hate him, it's up to you. That's your opinion, and that's fine.
Astra and her musings in the comments says, "Preach, Rosie."
Yes, hear, hear.
In the future, I like books.
Well, and Rosie, I think we're kind of getting to the wrap up here. So before you and I kind of wrap up proper, I think maybe we should say goodbye to and thank Connor and Leah, and as well as Stephanie for she wasn't able to stay on, but all three of you for actually joining us on video on Google Hangouts here with this chat, because you guys definitely contributed excellently to the conversation, and we're so glad you found the Gryffindor in you to get on camera and get on the mic and talk to us. We really appreciate you guys contributing in that way. So thank you for being here.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.
And Rosie had such a lovely little speech. I mostly had mine already. I will piggyback on that by saying I say the same exact thing and rephrase by saying it does matter what Rosie thinks, and it does matter what I think, and it does matter what you all think, and for the same reason, because it matters what we all think. That the thing I think I tried to make clear in my responses to all of your comments, because I think what's amazing about Snape, what's amazing really about any of the characters in Harry Potter, is that they do touch all of us on such a deeply. Dumbledore, Snape, multiple characters, Lupin in my case. Shout out for all the Lupin love out there. But any of those characters, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Lavender Brown, for all we know, they all touch us on a personal level in some way, and we all have such unique personal connections with these guys. Whether we like them or don't. And what's important for us to make clear on the podcast is that while we have our way of kind of breaking down a character or an event in Harry Potter and analyzing it, our way is not the only way. The reason we do it that way is because we want to show you guys different approaches for how to take apart Harry Potter and look at Harry Potter. I think for years and years, Harry Potter has been looked purely as a piece of children's literature, and not beyond that in a lot of ways. And as just recently has Harry Potter become respected academically. And I think there's a lot of excitement with that, but I think it's important to learn the tools, and I'm learning them from you guys just as I'm trying to teach them, and I think we're all trying to teach them on the show. The tools to critically take apart a piece of writing, to look at our love for a piece of writing, and then go even deeper into that and say and examine what was the author trying to say, and how does what the author was communicating speak to us as individuals. And like Rosie said, Harry Potter does that. It offers that so easily as a series for us, and that's what's so easy to go back to and continue to re-examine. So yeah, definitely. Again, I mean, boy, we should have been doing these more often. This was fun. This was so neat to see that so many of you turned up for this, and such really beautiful, thoughtful comments left in our Q&A here. So thank you guys for participating in this today.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who tried to make it on. I'm sorry that I didn't necessarily manage to make you all able to get into the chat. At least we did manage to get your brilliant comments inside, and hopefully you guys were able to see these questions as well, and to think about those, even if we didn't manage to find the time to talk about them. We value you guys so much, just what you have done for Alohomora, what you've done for, you know, us as a team over the last 4 years now. Wow, is just ridiculous. And for those of you that have been with us from the start, thank you for sticking with us for so long. For those of you that have maybe come in, maybe even just found it last week, thank you so much for joining in, and for sending us your comments, and for joining in this chat that had, you know, hundreds of comments within 5 hours of the episode being released, or people kind of tweeting me saying, I'm not going to listen to it until Monday, but I want to join in, all that kind of thing. There is nothing like the Harry Potter community, and we are so blessed to be part of it, and you guys make us just feel so warm and fuzzy inside, even when we're talking about really horrible negative things. And you know, as I said earlier, if you haven't already seen it, please do go and check out our future plans video, because although we may be trying to trick you a little bit at the beginning, we are really excited about where we are going to go from here. And if you've liked this chat, it was meant to be a thematic chat. We kind of went on a few tangents away from Snape at points, but we all managed to bring it back to it in the end.
Yeah, y'all wanted to talk about Dumbledore and Petunia.
Never mind. But that's the kind of thing that we want to be doing from now on. So just like these questions that you guys have been sending in to us, these topics to discuss, that is kind of what we're looking for in the future. We want you guys to send us things to talk about, and that's what we're going to be doing, is going into this much depth about individual ideas outside of chapter by chapter. Yep. So thank you for joining in this little express experiment, and I think that is all we need to say, really.
That
Michael?
pretty much, that pretty much wraps it up. I think we'll just end it by saying that, as Rosie mentioned, you can check out the Patreon video to find, which is now public for you guys, to find out what the post-Hallows plans are at alohomora.mugglenet.com. I think you all know that by now. But as well, this is the whole point of this is to, again, remind you guys, this is not where the discussion ends. Alohomora is as much about our opinions as yours. As we said, it's about all opinions, and so we want you to take this will be available. This discussion today will be available for you guys to view again, and listen to and discuss, continuing on with the Snape discussion. But in addition to that, do not forget episode 184. Please go re-listen to it, re-examine it, see what new things you can find within that episode. And there are over 500 comments now on the main site on that particular episode. It has probably been one of the most massive commenting sprees that we have ever seen on Alohomora. And we want you to go ahead and insert yourself in there wherever you can find room. But yeah, I think overall, I'm so glad we did this today. And Rosie, thank you for kind of leading this. Thank you to Kat too for kind of brainstorming this idea. And thank you to you, the listeners. And I think with that, we'll turn our cameras out and fade off with the theme song. Is that what we do? Is that how we're the operation here?
So. Yeah. Okay.
So until next time, listeners, thank you for listening to Alohomora. Open the Dumbledore. Bye. Bye.